Welcome to the Masters of Supply Chain Weekly News Digest. I'm joined today by my good friend John Church. John, great to see you.
David, great to see you as well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. I'm just struggling with the news on tariffs again. We had a little bit of a pendulum swing over the weekend. Friday, Europe was back and the EU was back on, and then it got pushed out to July. And I think we're going to continue to see a bit of this. We're going to see we're going to continue to see this back and forth until we get to some sort of a deal. I'm just kind of hoping that the deal happens sooner rather than later.
I just got off an operating call with one of my boards, and they were very quick to update all their numbers now that the tariffs aren't going to be 145% from China, to make sure that they left us with less of a bitter pill in our mouth. So we'll see. We'll see where it actually goes.
We will, and it's also interesting. Today we saw, some of the big retailers, Abercrombie and Fitch, came out and pretty much blew away earnings and gave good
Yep.
guidance for the rest of the year. GE came out and did the same in terms of their aerospace division. So it's one of those times where we're seeing, that churn is now leading to some level of stability, which kind of doesn't make sense. But I'm not gonna fight it too much from a supply chain perspective. This is all good, and stability is good for us.
For sure. And I think as we've seen, and you and I have both had discussions, this is going from this existential threat to just another thing that we have to deal with. And getting, as I had a boss once who said, let's stick to our knitting. Let's get back to we manage cash. We worry about lead times. We worry about customer service. We make sure quality and safety are right. And those are the things that sort of bring us back home. Which, it's interesting. You and I both had a chance to sit in on a roundtable discussion through Masters of Supply Chain here in May around really connecting and ecosystems. And I think maybe the first time you and I met, it was over this discussion of how can we use technology and how can we create these communities that are readily sharing information, are connected. The technology existed. How can we create a governance model and an operating model where we share with each other? And I'm sort of brought back to that as you think about how we deal with tariffs. This agility requires you to see and work seamlessly across your value chain, and your value chain is almost never just you. Your value chain is a bunch of partners that you need to be able to share information with, and each one acting on the behalf of themselves and the others in order to optimize the whole. I thought it was a pretty good call. I wonder if anything in particular struck you.
I mean, I find it fascinating, John. Just, as long as you and I have been in supply chain, that this has always kind of been one of those problems. And there's been a lot of different perspectives on it in terms of, collaborate to source better, collaborate to move your logistics better. And you and I have also both sat in the seat of having to make those decisions. And it's never that simple. And as I was reflecting on the conversation from the roundtable, I kind of took myself back and said, okay, like in the history of supply chain, a lot of what we have built today is based on, the findings of the Toyota way and just-in-time manufacturing. And that forced collaboration through a supplier network. And so what got lost in translation in terms of, so why is it still so difficult? Why are so many companies so disconnected? And the answer that I gave myself was, well, it's because we've decentralized our supply chains. We've bifurcated again and again and again to the point whereby it's such a complex and detailed ecosystem. It's actually a really difficult problem to solve. And what I heard in the roundtable was everybody's working on it, but nobody's really cracked the nut yet.
Yeah, I'm surprised sort of how long it's taking. I mean, we've all talked about this aspiration, and I think we had some great examples, right? We had a big CPG that wanted to tell us about how they're starting to be very thoughtful in terms of the information they share, that some of the barriers they had to overcome was just being super clear on what it is was information that needed to be shared in order to have both companies operate at their best and sort of become real trading partners, less transactional, but partner and answer each other's sentences, which I think is exciting stuff. But it still seems like those are the exceptions and not the rule. that
Right.
this technology exists. I remember you early on said you kept on getting the question, where do you start? Where do you start? And you said it doesn't matter where you start. It just matters that you start. And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see this getting momentum, but it isn't as it isn't as intense and as intentional as maybe I expected it to be. Does that surprise you?
It does a little bit because I think it seems to be the root cause of a lot of challenges. And yet I do think that everybody has a certain level of skepticism around fully embracing it. And I myself have as well, John, to be honest, because I kind of look at it and say there's certain things that are really important to me in terms of the metrics that I need to measure to run a very optimized, efficient supply chain. But I don't need to tell everybody everything about
Yep.
every single part. And I think that this is where there starts to be this level of confusion in terms of, the concept of an ecosystem and free flowing data between all parties, and then everything is solved. I actually don't think that's right. I think that the ecosystem needs to be defined in terms of the best interests and the best practices of your specific need. It doesn't need to be an absolutely 100% transparent model because
Right.
that may not work for anybody.
Uh, right. I mean, we need to be clear and honest. We don't need to be naked.
Yeah.
And having some engagement rules. I think we heard from folks that's an important place to start. But I think this is the holy grail. The discussion has moved to AI and how you can leverage AI. And for me, the backbone of this is I know how I'm going to work across my trading partners. We can see the information that's important for us to see, and I think someone made the comment that it's like the goal isn't vertical integration, but it's virtual vertical integration. And I remember we used to be on calls and looking at mergers and acquisitions, and boy, wouldn't we get all these synergies if we formed with these companies, if we merged with these companies, if we acquired these companies? And the answer is sure, but you don't have to go buy them in order to have that stuff happen. As long as you do it in a thoughtful, appropriately competitive kind of way, you can still get at the sort of collaboration that can really make a difference and allow people to be at their best. And that can happen with customers, it can happen with suppliers, it can happen to build scale across manufacturers and for the good of the ecosystem. And I think the delivery on that promise is still on the offing, maybe.
And this is a very, this is the really interesting part of this, which is and what are our expectations versus what is the reality, and what is really going to move the dial for our business. So, back in the day, um, I worked really hard on visibility solutions, and it
Mm-hmm.
was, we had multiple, disparate TMS systems. Nothing was communicating. We wanted to get our world on a page. We wanted to see everything. We spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of energy. And, through a third party, we built like what was state of the art at the time in terms of true supply chain visibility. And once we had it all put together, we had it on a beautiful big 84-inch screen on the wall. It was a touch screen. You could, just everything.
Right.
It was fantastic. And we stood there, feeling very proud, and we looked at it and said, what problem have we just solved? Like this was only the beginning of it. And I think that, this is part of the challenge, which is whenever we talk ecosystems today, everybody gets a little bit concerned about, okay, but that means we have to connect multiple systems, and they all work on different periods of time, and they all work
Right.
on different code bases, and some are running tabular batch jobs while others are free flowing Python and everything else, and so it becomes very complex. And I think the true iteration of what we need to have as an ecosystem is above and beyond all of those challenges. It is actually an ecosystem, if you like, layer on top of all of the other pieces of data that we have today to be able to really um, to be able to really pull the power from it. Because in that way, you would then be able to define what's relevant and what's not. it's a beautiful use case for AI.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you brought up the idea of a use case. One of the things we heard loud and clear from people is you're not going to get the change management, you're not going to get the support, and you're not going to be able to get this thing with any legs at all if you don't focus on the value proposition. You don't look at a use case and you do use case by use case. So many times we hear people stopping at the vision, and it's so massive it's not actionable. I mean, I think we heard the success stories where we focused on this thing,
Yeah.
and then we focused on these things, and then we focused on bringing another partner. And that sort of model appears to be one that, as you might expect, I guess, is having the best success because you can prove it out, you can scale in, and then you can discover what comes next. I think the value will come from people justifying it one use case at a time, and then seeing that we can stitch these things together. You can, and maybe you have to start with the end in mind, but to your point, you still got to start.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think that this is where it becomes difficult for supply chain practitioners because we're so good at solving problems, and we want to have we want we are we're almost perfectionists in terms of wanting to get there, and so solving individual pieces of a bigger problem is a little bit hard for us to do. But the mentality of but solving one and then adding to that and adding to that and adding to that again actually gets you to the same place eventually, and that's the way to show progress. It's the way to show ROI, and getting out of this mentality of everything has to be the behemoth of projects. Everything, we love nothing more than a massive project that we're never going to be able to deliver because we can rally everybody in behind it. It's like, yeah, that's very 80s, and we need to now come forward. And the modern way of doing that is it's to be agile, to be nimble, to be very, very much get done what you can get done and then move on to the next thing. It's back to, the growth mindset mentality
Yes.
almost. So
Yep.
so it's great, in the companies that we heard from, it's great to see that it's great to see the sparks of that, John, because it starts to make me feel like we are turning a corner and we're getting onto that next level.
Yep, I agree. And maybe it's appropriate that the way for us to get agility is to use an agile approach to learn a little bit and then learn a little bit more. We've all been involved in projects that took 3 years to implement, and by the time they were done, the world had moved on, and here we are with a bright the software version of bright shiny steel welded into the ground, and solving a problem for nobody that doesn't exist any longer. So
Well, we can't do anything with exactly. John Church, as always, it's an absolute pleasure. I always enjoy our conversations. If you like the content today, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. If you don't, get in touch and we'll do what we can to change it. Thank you for listening.